Could I ask everyone to come get to their seats? Apologize for us being 5 minutes late. We had a little run over on our executive session. I'd like to remind everyone to fill out a blue speaker card if...
Mayor, we're still in executive session.
Oh, we are? So we have to undo that, right?
We have to do this.
Where's my prompt? All right. Let's see, I got to reconvene it. All right, we will now reconvene the public portion of this meeting, and I'll accept any motions from the council.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make that motion.
Ms. Comp, would you like to read that out loud? The items on the motion. Do you want to state them?
I'll second it. Go ahead.
Do you want to start your motion and then let me fill in your questions?
Okay, so I guess, the motion that I'm going to make is that what we discussed was that the parking and the pavers are okay. The attorney's fees are out. We won't pay any attorney's fees. The additional building, I guess to the west, can only be used for dry storage. Do we want to say anything about the roadway or no? No, okay. We also want to put in here that nothing that's going to be in this agreement is going to be precedent setting, and that all of the lawsuits associated with this will be extinguished if this is accepted.
Okay.
Okay, we have a motion.
I second it.
We have a second by Mr. Marlar. I'll open this up for discussion.
Can I clarify, just to make sure that I understand your motion? So I understand that you are suggesting that the current parking, the use of the building for dry storage, and the pavers, picnic tables, et cetera, there are okay, that the driveway is okay, the road issues are okay, and that attorney's fees will not be paid. This will extinguish all claims, and this will not be precedent setting.
Correct.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second. Do we have any discussion, anything that anyone would like to bring up?
Are we agreeing on the roadway, allowing the roadway to be as is and not?
Go ahead, Mr. Brady.
Is that a yes or a no?
Pending fire department approval, yes for me.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Seeing no further discussion.
Mayor, real quick, since y'all are going to make an official decision in the city, the public still can provide input, even though they won't have a full idea what y'all are moving on. They could still comment before y'all vote. So, because it's the public portion of the meeting. So.
I'll take your advice on that.
If anyone wants to comment, they can get up and speak at this time about the executive session motion that was just made. So.
Would anyone like to speak on this issue that's in the public?
Hi, Marianne Wines. Well, having not had the benefit of being in the executive session, but I will say that if you're settling a lawsuit that we've already won in court, it seems like you're giving away things for free. You know, there's 4 different parts of the easement. The judge has ruled against all 4 of them. The one, he reversed his decision because they're supposed to bring witnesses to testify. So it just, I'm very concerned that y'all are doing non-precedent things only for one man who has made claims against the city, held y'all up, and I'm glad you're not paying his attorney fees for goodness sakes, but I just want to go on record and say that this is kind of unbelievable. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wines. Anyone else like to make a comment, public comment?
Can I ask our attorney to sort of rebut the fact that all of this has not been settled in court and been won?
There are still pending claims, as explained to council by myself and the counsel for the insurance company for the city as well. Not all claims are resolved at this time.
Thank you.
And I think to further clarify, Ms. Ramswell, the public ought to know that this is just a counter to a settlement offer. This is not final, regardless of how the council votes. This is not a final decision. This is a counter offer. Depending on the plaintiff's response, it may just continue on litigation, or there may be a settlement. So this is just part of the process that the council's embarking on at this part. This is not tonight's vote is not going to indicate the final outcome of this lawsuit. Seeing no further public comment, let's go ahead and take this to a vote.
Mayor, I'm going to put on the record I must abstain. I'm related to one of the litigants.
The vote is unanimous. So moved. So this portion of the executive session is now over, and we will now reconvene the public portion of this meeting. Before we get started with our invocation and pledge of allegiance, I just want to remind everyone to fill out a blue speaker card if you'd like to speak about items on this tonight's agenda, other than items listed under public hearing, which has its own opportunity for you to speak. You have 3 minutes to make your comments. You can fill out as many cards on as many of tonight's agenda items that you'd like to speak on. You can fill out a yellow card to speak about any item not on tonight's agenda. This was done to increase your access to speak to the council on issues on or off the agenda on multiple issues that concern you as a citizen of the city of Destin. We move this access to speak at the beginning of the meetings to provide everyone a chance to share their concerns, even if they cannot stay for the duration of the entire meeting. It also lets the council know your thoughts and positions on issues prior to any motions, discussions, and votes as we move through tonight's legislative portion of our meeting. I kindly remind the speakers to give their name and address when they speak, address the council and the chair as a whole, and if you struggle with that, just look me in the eye and you can say everything right to me. If you start to name names or point fingers, I'm going to respectfully ask for you to step aside and leave the podium. At the same time, I just want to encourage the council members to remember this is the public's opportunity to speak. It's not a time to banter with the public. Just take notes, and we'll take whatever criticisms or accolades that come our way, and we'll address them later on during the meeting. If you have individual questions to clarify something that the speaker had to say, I'll just ask to be recognized, and I'll recognize you and give you that opportunity. With all that being said, I'd like to call this meeting to order. July 16, 2018, regular city council meeting. And I don't have my phone with me. Pastor, we have an associate pastor. Would you like to introduce yourself real quick before you say prayer? Would everyone please stand?
Here we go. My name is Donnie Carbone. I'm with Shoreline Church, and let's pray. Father, I just thank you for the opportunity once again to represent the people of Destin, but also we get to represent your character and your values. Lord, I pray for this council that you will give us all wisdom to make the right decisions regarding the resources we have, the grace to steward the people that you put in trust with us, but also give us patience to deal with all the issues that seem to cloud our agenda. Lord, I just thank you again for giving us your favor in this community. In your name we pray. Amen.
We begin the meeting with the agenda approval. Does anyone have anything that they would like to change or make any comments to this agenda?
Mr. Mayor, I would like to have 4G moved up to the top before the approval of minutes, if possible.
And Mayor,
Make that in the
furthermore...
form of a motion.
Okay. Furthermore, I would like 4F to be moved, continued to the next meeting. We've got a full docket tonight. I don't know if we want to go into the heavy details of that one tonight.
Okay, so we got, let's just do let's do one at a time here in the form of a motion. So we have a motion by Mr. Marlar. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a second. I think we need a supermajority vote to make these changes, correct? Okay, let's go ahead and vote on this first. The vote is unanimous, so moved. Mr. Destin?
I make the motion to move 4F and continue it to the next meeting.
I'll second that.
Okay, we got a motion, we got a second. Any discussion, Rodney?
Yes, sir, thank you. Moving these items ahead, they are in the city manager's reports, which requires no public comment. Moving them forward, is that still the case? There's no public comment?
If someone fills out a blue card, they can make comments on anything that's not a public hearing. So if they've already turned in a blue card, they'll be able to comment on 4G.
Okay, thank you.
But that will be, they can make those comments when we get to item 3. After we address the item, okay? We have a motion, we have a second. Take a vote. Ayes have it, unanimous. So moved.
I also have one more request for an agenda change, if I could ask someone on council to make the motion. I want to add consideration by the City Council of a settlement agreement in the floodplain code enforcement cases. I had emailed a document to you all this afternoon, and we can discuss it under my reports if that's okay.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, let's go ahead and vote on that. The vote is unanimous. Ayes have it. Kimberly, we'll do that during your portion, City
Yes,
Attorney?
please. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. I'm going to step up to the plate right now, and we're going to take up the item 4G, which was under the City Manager Report, now is going to be, we're going to take care of this before the approval of the minutes under old business. Third Amendment to the City Manager Employment Agreement. Jeff, do you want to make a comment there?
I will. This 4G is an item that Ms. Lejeune's attorney prepared, and he ran it by me before he sent it in, and I made minimal changes just to add some clarification and really the prefatory language at the start, explaining that Ms. Lejeune had talked to Kim Kopp and I before the last meeting at one point, and we had said we would make sure Ms. Lejeune had a chance to bring this back before y'all, once her attorney had a chance to look at it. After he looked at it, he didn't change really what the payouts would be, but he did change how it was spelled out, that instead of the additional weeks being for retirement, they would be for two things. It would be for both the non-competes that they're included in her agreement, and they'd also be as part of the mutual release that's in the agreement. One item that I do want to point out to you, because it's not an additional monetary item, at the very end there was something in the Second Amendment agreement about health insurance. If she was eligible for health insurance, the city would pay for it till the end of the year. And the second agreement was left kind of broad because at the time we not researched it. It was something that Ms. Lejeune wanted added at the last second at the meeting, and so we weren't sure how to do that. And so we spelled it out in the Third Amendment agreement that the city would pay the premium through the end of the year, because that's really the only way that the insurance company would be able to handle that anyway. And so that was something that was included in the original agreement. It's just it wasn't monetized in the original agreement. It was just we kind of left it broad. If it's allowed under the law, we'd figure out a way to do it. So.
And that was in the, if I remember right, after reading it, that was in the document that you sent us, the Third Amendment.
That's in the third, yeah. It actually spells out that the premiums will be paid. And the second agreement, it said, really, however legally it can be done, it would be done. And that's how it has to be done if she's no longer full-time employed here at a certain point in time.
Thank you, Ms. Burns. Mr. Oberdire.
Okay, so we've had a couple of weeks to think about this now, which I'm kind of glad that we did, because I think it's kind of a mess, and I think everybody agrees that. Here's my feelings on this, and I don't want anybody to get too upset about this, but I kind of feel insulted, and the reason I feel insulted is because it appears to me that members of the City Council had some concerns about the performance of the city manager. And in January, they gave her a very good performance review. In fact, they gave her a pay raise. So everything must have been okay in January. But sometime between January and now, there have been some issues. The reason I feel insulted is because under the Sunshine Law, we can't discuss things amongst ourselves. I can't call Tuffy, and I can't call Preble, I can't call Rodney and talk to him, or sit down and have a cup of coffee with them or anything. The only way that I can know what's going on in their minds is for them to put it on the agenda and to bring it forth in the City Council in a meeting just like this. None of them saw fit to do that. They ignored that fact, and they kept it to themselves until all of a sudden, 2 weeks ago, on a Monday night, all four of them decided that it was time, that things had gotten so bad that it was time for us to fire the city manager. And I'm going to tell you that I don't think that anybody, you can sugarcoat this any way you want. We're firing the city manager, okay? We're giving her the opportunity to resign, and we can make all the amendments we want to her employment contract, but we're firing her, okay? And that to me, that's insulting to me. I think it's insulting to the city manager. I think it's also insulting to the citizens of Destin. Here's my thing. I spent 30 years in the Air Force, and I took an oath. I took an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and I took that oath very seriously. And they saw fit to send me to a place that I wasn't really in favor of going to, but I went anyway, and I did my job. And when we came back from Vietnam, they spit on us. And that insulted me. And that's how I feel now about this. So I know what it means to be insulted. And I will tell you that when I took that oath and I stood to defend that Constitution, I was defending the rights of those people to be free, and I was actually defending their right to spit on me. I will tell you that's how it makes me feel now. And I will tell you that when I was elected to this position a few months ago, I took another oath, and I intend to uphold that oath. But I will tell you this. I don't let people spit on me anymore. Mayor, that's all I have to say tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Oberdire. I've got a couple more members that want to speak, and I want to make sure, and I'll ask the city attorney, that we're going to operate within the Robert's Rules of Order. This Third Amendment, which the city manager has signed, should we get a motion before we have further comment or further discussion, or can I let these members speak before we do that?
Usually you should get a motion before you do debate, but in the resolution that controls your procedures, y'all don't have to strictly adhere to it. So if they want to discuss it before they make their motion, that's fine. But if you want to strictly adhere to Robert's rules, they do need to make a motion, then discuss it.
Well, I just, and not to diminish the thing that Mr. Obadiah stated, but I just want to make sure that we do this in an orderly and a properly way before we continue on. So seeing how that this Third Amendment requires our approval, even though the city manager has agreed to sign it, we still need to approve that amendment. So I'd like to entertain a motion before we go on. I'll give everyone that wants to speak as council members that opportunity before we bring this to a vote. I'm asking for somebody to make a motion that we approve the Third Amendment to City Manager's Employment Agreement is what I'm asking for.
Mayor, I move to accept the Third Amendment to the City Manager's Employment Agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Destin. I have a motion. I have a second by Mr. Morgan. First is Tuffy.
Mayor, real quick, the recommended motion also had and accept Ms. Lejeune's resignation. So if you want to make the full.
Yeah, and I'll amend my motion to include that amendment language.
Did you get that, ma'am? All right, because I'm going to have you read it back for us before we take the vote. First up is Mr. Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I originally had voted no on this because, personally, I enjoyed working with Ms. Lejeune, and we did have a professional relationship, and she's always good to me, and I tried to be good to her. Since then, I've had a private discussion with her, and I know that she's ready to go. There is no reason for us to sit back and banter back and forth with this thing. The fact is that by now I know she's ready to go, and I'll support this. In the motion, I hope that, or in the notion that I hope that she can find a very good job and prosper in the future. Just thank you for your service, Ms. Lejeune.
Thank you, Mr. Dixon. Mr. Marler.
Thank you, Mayor. It pains me to have to agree with Tuffy on that point, that I will probably agree to allow Ms. Lejeune to leave us and go on to greener fields. But there's a couple of things that disturb me, and I'd like some answers, because I'm one of the council members that I've not had a problem with her. I don't know where the other council members have had problems. I'd like to see that documentation of problems and things of that nature. But the thing that gets me the most is that when this was brought to our attention at the last meeting, one council member and the attorney created the amendments without the other council. I don't see how that procedurally can be done, because when we've hired or fired, or when we've hired other city managers, normally the council comes up with and has the mayor negotiate a lot of stuff, and that includes negotiating, to me, what went on tonight, what went on at the last meeting. Am I happy? No. I don't think some of the citizens are happy, because, as I said before, and I'm tired of the revolving door. We're never going to get, if you want a yes person who's going to cow down to the council every time something goes wrong, fine. That's what you're going to get eventually, and that's where we're wrong. I've said this over and over again. We, as a body of the council, are legislative. We hire a city manager to be the administrator, and that means the rules that we make, he or she administrates those rules, or makes sure those rules are followed. If they're not followed, then we have a reason to come back to ask the questions of the city manager why they were not followed. The issue that I see is that certain council members have an issue with Ms. Lejeune that I don't think that's going to go away even when she leaves. They're going to have an issue with the next city manager and the next city manager. And the other thing is that we've had council members publicly name a staff member that's not done what they're doing, and again, that is wrong, because again, we are legislative. The administrator takes care of that. If you have a problem with a staff member, you take it to the city manager. You don't name that person in a public meeting. It's not fair to that person, because it puts the city at a liable risk. The last thing I want to say on this matter is, it stinks. I've considered having, well, I'll get to that part later. It stinks. I don't like it. I don't think the public likes it. But as Tuffy said, and I've also had a conversation with Ms. Lejeune, she knows that she needs to leave because she's not going to have the full confidence of this council. And I'm sure where the vote's going to go tonight, but I'm not happy about it. And I wish we could figure out a way to change it, but we can't. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Marlar. I don't see any other council members that want to speak. My only comment is Ms. Lejeune's been the utmost consummate professional to me as a new Greenhorn elected official. I appreciate her efforts. At the same time, she doesn't need to defend herself. She doesn't need to defend the city. That's what the public is supposed to do. I just wish her well. I think she's been successful in the past, and she'll be successful no matter where she goes. Seeing no further comments, I'd like to go ahead and take this to a vote to accept the motion. Would you like to just for public consumption, please reread the motion if you would?
Yes, sir. The motion is to approve the third amendment to the city manager's employment agreement and accept her resignation. The motion was made by
It was Mr. Destin.
I didn't write down. I wrote that it was seconded by Morgan, but it was by Mr. Destin. I apologize. Thank you.
All right, the motion's been read. Let's go ahead.
Mayor, the public does need, they do get input before y'all vote. You need to let them do that. So if anyone's turning in blue cards, they need to.
I thought that's.
Yes, sir. We do have two. We have two.
I thought that we had clarified that with Mr. Braden, that this is not under that.
The public has a right to comment on anything before y'all vote on it, and so that they do get a chance to speak. So.
I don't have a problem with that. I appreciate your recommendation, sir.
We have two.
On this particular issue?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'm going to call first up Mr. Larry Williger. Williges.
Yeah. That's all right. Everybody has a problem. Yeah.
Dude, I apologize for that butcher job, sir.
My name is Larry Williges, and I'm a resident of Destin. I have been for the past 26 years. I brought something in to show you, Mr. Mayor. Several years ago, the city presented this at an open house to anybody that wanted it as a souvenir. It reads, "Proud to be a Destin resident." Okay, for the 26 years that I've lived in Destin, I've been proud to be a Destin resident. For the 12 years I served on this council, I was also proud to be a Destin resident. For the remaining years that I've had it on my car, I also was proud. However, that all ended this weekend. I took it off my car because I'm no longer a proud resident of Destin. Reason being, after what happened, what I call a public lynching of our city manager. I'm not challenging council's authority to fire her, but what I'm upset about is the manner in which it was done. I would like to offer kudos and congratulations to a lady by the name of Robin Newell. She was our former library director, and her tenure was 4 days. She resigned because of what she described as a lack of honesty, integrity, and transparency on the part of the council. Mayor, you and 3 other city members, council members, felt that you were blindsided, I understand, by what transpired. The resignation, firing. The remaining council members not only didn't apparently feel that way, some were quick to respond with what appears to have been petty reasons to seek removal. Also, much denial on sunshine violations. I'd like to raise a question. Did any of these critical council members hold a one-on-one private meeting with the city manager prior to endorsing this resignation removal activity, to let her know her apparent shortcomings and take corrective action? I know Ms. Lejeune, Carice Lejeune, to be a very capable city manager of high integrity, and apparently the council did too, because I thought it was February, she was granted a merit pay increase based on job performance. Now, 5 months later, she's shown the door. That's pretty severe. While I served on the city council, I never thought that any one individual council member had the authority to direct a staff member, in this case, the city attorney, to perform any action. I thought it took the council voting to approve such action. The city attorney was available to council members to advise individual council members if they asked questions or answer questions. The criticism of Destin is at all-time high because of hasty, not well thought out council actions. The general public doesn't define its criticism or limit it to the 4 city council members that engaged in this activity. They paint it with a broad brush, and it becomes the entire city council, including yourself, Mr. Mayor. We've gotten a black eye in Destin over this right now. I've been spoken to by a lot of people about it. My final comment is, may God bless this great nation of ours, and God help the city of Destin. Thank you for the time to spend to talk to you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir, for your comments. Next up, I can't read your writing. Sandstrom? Ron Sandstead. Sorry, Ron. I blew that too. That's an easy name.
That's okay. A lot of people mess it up. My name's Ron Sandstead. I live at 337 Calhoun. And Skip and I have a shared experience with having been spit on after that war. And I don't like being spit on either. Anyway, I'm proud of our city, and I'm proud to be a Destinite, and I'm proud of our city council, and we voted a diverse group of individuals to be on the city council, and I expect you to use your best judgment, and I think that's what we hired you for, and I think that's what you're doing. Now, I don't know all the reasons why this happened, but I appreciate your judgment, and I appreciate your maturity, and I know you're doing what you feel is right. So that's what we hired you for, and I thank you. And I thank Ms. Lejeune for her service. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shandstead. Anyone else in the audience have anything they'd like to add? Mr. Parker.
Captain Mike Parker, 827 Killaire Court. First of all, I'd like to thank Carice for the job you've done. We appreciate you, we love you, and wish you the best. But as some of them have spoken tonight and said that it's more over the way this was handled last week that disturbs a lot of us. I feel that when you have 7 people up here, and 4 of them seem to know everything going on, and 3 of them are in the dark, and the mayor's in the dark, it gives a bad appearance. And so we look at it from over here at the public. It just appears, it looks like a violation of the Sunshine Law, that collusion goes on. And that's not what we want. I felt like when Skip asked last week, he said, I'm in the dark, threw his hands up and said, can we have a couple of weeks that we can look at it, that y'all should have shown him the respect and the other guys the respect of giving them some time to look at it. They felt flat-footed, didn't know what was going on. Well, that looks bad. It looks like bad government. And when they prayed over the meeting tonight, he asked for wisdom. The Bible says, in the multitude of counsel is where you find wisdom. That's the complete counsel. That's every one of you. And if one of you asks and says, we need some more time to look at it, I don't know what's going on, I'd hope you'd show respect to one another and all of you be able to sit down together and, do what needs to be done. But it just has such a bad flavor to it, a bad taste, that some of these people were done wrong and kept in the dark. And so I hope in the future that y'all will not act in that accordance, that it would give a more of appearance of a unified body, that you know what's going on, because I just feel really bad that 3 council members and the mayor felt like they were in the dark over the whole situation. It was embarrassing. And that's the word I've got from a lot of my friends and people, said this whole thing was embarrassing. So that's how I feel.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. Seeing no further public comments, we have a motion, we have a second, and let's go ahead and take Third Amendment City Manager Employment Agreement to a vote. We have 6 ayes, 1 no. So moved.
Mayor, I would like to sincerely thank all the members of this council for the opportunity to serve you and the citizens of Destin for the past 2 years. And especially I'd like to thank my awesome staff, and I wish everyone the absolute best, staff, council, and citizens alike. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Carice. And as we move forward and hire an interim city manager and eventually a manager, I appreciate the terms of your agreement to where you will help in that transition. I know that you'll be able to help the next city manager lay the groundwork for them to have a successful start to managing the city. And I appreciate that. I know that'll be difficult and hard, but I appreciate that professionalism. Of course, I wouldn't expect anything less from you. So thank you very much for that. What we're going to do now is move on to item number 1, which is approval of the minutes. I think we put that off last meeting because there was some questions to some portions of the meeting. I assume that everyone had ample opportunity to review these sets of minutes. If it pleases the council, we'll just do we can just vote separately on A, B, C, or D, or if everyone's in concurrence, we'll just get a motion to approve the minutes as is. Have a second.
Let's do all 4, Mayor, and I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Braden. We have a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second it, Mayor.
And we have a second. So the motion is to approve of minutes of June 28th special city council meeting, June 18th regular city council meeting, the minutes of June 13th special city council meeting, and the minutes of June 4th, 2018 city council executive session. We have a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, let's take it to a vote. The vote is unanimous, so moved. Item 2, we don't have any proclamations or special presentations at this time. So right now, we'll move into item number 3, which is the public's opportunity to speak on items that are not public hearings and any other matters not on the agenda. Good, we got some yellow cards. Finally, this is my idea. I just hope people start doing this. First is Mr. Abear, Miss Abear. That's a T, isn't it? Miss Abear. Or shall I just call you T?
Teresa Abear, representing the Chairwoman, Parks and City Recreation Committee. I come to you tonight, council members and mayor, in the fact that Clement Taylor Park made a decision to put in abeyance the 90 plan. with the grant money that we had gotten approved and set aside from the Horizon money to put in a new fire station boat lift. We as a team would like to know what was that and why we were not included in the decision to add a fire station boat lift. Any comments?
Well, we'll let Tuffy Dixon make a comment.
We didn't make a decision on anything yet. The way I saw it is we asked it to be held up for a little bit of time to allow the fire district to have some input into where they would like to possibly put a new fire station. So we haven't approved anything yet. We're only getting ideas or suggestions or whatever it may be. So unless I'm mistaken, we haven't actually approved that or anything.
Just so you know, state legislature allows us a grant if it is a public park to put in a state fire department boat lift, takes away grant funding and makes it no longer a free park and a free beach for the city of Destin. Has anyone looked into those facts?
No, we have not, that I know of, and I'm not sure that what you're saying is absolutely correct. And the reason I say that is that I've heard that before on different pieces of property, and that's not come to be yet. But I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just not saying you're absolutely right, okay?
Horizon money will run out real soon, and we put this money in abeyance for this grant. And as your Parks and Recreation Chairwoman, all I ask is that you include us. You assigned us as a team to recognize and take care of our city, keep our parks updated, take care of the Morgan City Park, keeping us money coming in for baseball games all summer long, making the city a ton of money, enjoying the parks and beaches on the areas where there are no access in front of hotels and condos. So we as a team would like to be included in decisions made by the city and city council and the fire station. That's all we ask.
I don't think that was ever anybody's intent to keep you in the dark or slighted in any way, and I would encourage you to go talk with our land use attorney and our city council attorney so that we can do the research into your very question so we can get to the bottom of it and find out if exactly what we're looking at.
Thank you. But in future, anything to do with the parks, could y'all please let us be a part of it before it becomes city council recommendations?
Yeah, I think...
Wasn't this walked on, or wasn't it a part of something else? Because I didn't have
I think it was
prior
part
notice.
of, it was on the agenda, it was an agenda item, I believe, for the meeting last Wednesday night. So that was public noticed. So,
Because I didn't remember getting any information specifically about that, and I know we didn't get any plans or anything.
I think it was public noticed, and the CRA took that issue up. I think it was presented during that Harbor CRA meeting. I wasn't in attendance of that, but I believe it was public notice. We can look into that and see if there was some oversight. We can rectify that. Mr. Braden?
I just want to agree with you 110% that this does need to come before that board.
And I would have been here last Monday, or the last city council meeting, as Mr. Morgan was very expressed. If you come to these meetings and see what we have to deal with, I have a very nice paying job that sometimes keeps me in Pensacola till late at night and have to get up early the next day. So I might miss a few of these meetings, but it's not on purpose. It's by due process of my full-time employment job that I'm paid for. I'm not paid for the City Council's Parks and Recreation Committee. So, but yes, if you can include us, we just want to take care of the city and we want to be a part of the team. That's all we ask. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hebert. So noted, I think, by all of us.
Wasn't intentional on my part either.
Mr. Menchel.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. As you know, you recently changed Resolution 1724, Rules of Procedure for Council Meetings, and adopted Resolution 1815. The purpose of the revision was, quote, to create efficiencies that will streamline the city council process, afford shorter meetings, make it more attractive for citizens to attend, and allow for greater public participation and resolution of concerns through an efficient public process, unquote. While the change does, in theory, accomplish its desired results, the two things this change did not do was, one, take away the rights of a citizen to attend the entire city council meeting and had no intentions of speaking, but based on something that transpired during the course of the meeting, steps up at the end during the comments from the public section portion of the agenda. And 2, taking away the public's right to briefly speak at the end of the meeting has had little to no impact on the length of the council meetings. I personally stepped up during the comments from the public portion of the agenda on numerous occasions, as well as many, many others, in attendance at council meetings. Based on something that was said during the meeting, based on having information that can answer a question that was raised during the meeting, based on being willing to step up and help with the problem that was raised during the meeting, and the list goes on and on. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm asking you to consider reinstating the comments from members of the audience portion to the agendas, and once you again give the residents of Destin the opportunity to speak at the end of the meeting, has been the practice for years.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell, but don't go away because I see you have a second card.
I do.
All right, go.
As a member, I'm chair of the Public Works, Public Safety, this is just a question that I'd like staff to come back next time. There's some question as far as protocol. I know things have changed, staff has changed with code enforcement. I'd like to try to just get some information at the next meeting, what the protocol is right now for code enforcement. There's some citizens that are constantly calling, asking questions, and I think it would be worthwhile if a member of staff could give that out. It's online, people would look at it. There's a noise issue at night, if there's a parking issue, just what the current protocols and procedures are for code enforcement.
Let me ask you a question there. And for those protocols, it's something that not only just that we talk about maybe at the next council meeting, but something that you'd like to see online where the average citizen who does have a code enforcement issue, to show them who to call, when to call, that kind of stuff.
Fantastic, sure, absolutely. Just the right contact number. You know, there's some issues at 10 o'clock at night, who would you call? Obviously, in some cases, it'd be the sheriff's office. There's just been some personnel changes. The city manager added new people. There was a long time where, I don't even know if all the staff's on board yet, but there was a lot of people that were missing from code enforcement. So just bringing the protocols forward would help, be it online or be it in a presentation. Thank you.
I think it's a wonderful idea, Mr. Mitchell. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, for any of you that got here late or didn't fill out a yellow card, this is an opportunity to step up to the microphone and talk about any item that's on the agenda or not on the agenda outside of a public hearing. Anyone else? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close this portion of the meeting under item number 3. That takes us to the city manager's report. Ms. Lejeune.
Yes, Mayor, thank you very much. This next item has to do with the medical and ancillary benefit renewals. This covers the employee benefit renewals for employee ancillary benefits to include dental, vision, disability, indemnity, and life, and employee health benefits that have been provided through Blue Cross Blue Shield of Florida Blue. I'm going to ask our HR manager, Ms. Karen Jankowski, to give an in-depth explanation of this particular item for council.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Thank you for your time tonight. As City Manager said, the agenda item before you talks about the medical and ancillary benefits. So I'll try and go through this. Please, I'm here for questions, and also David Barton, our brokers, he's here as well if we need further in-depth questions that I may not be able to answer for you. I'll start with the ancillary benefits for dental, vision, and so forth. We had a slight increase, 1.5%, which is about $83 annually. The reason for that is we added the addition of the dental implant benefit due to employee census and also employee feedback. That was one of the policy changes they would like to have added. Vision insurance, we had a 0% increase. Disability, we have short-term disability and long-term disability. There was a slight increase on that, and it's for usage, so it's either birth of a child or, a serious health condition. So we have those benefits in place. So that's a roughly $1,888 annually. Also, we do have a slight increase on the life insurance, and that's typically due to census. We've got a changing environment of staff, so that's approximately $752 annually. Our hospital indemnity policy, we had a 0% increase. So that's the ancillary benefits. Did you have any questions for that portion? Secondly,
Press on.
Thank you, sir. Sorry. Secondly is the health plan renewal. We were able to stay with our current provider, Blue Cross Blue Shield. Originally, they came back with a higher increase, but our brokers were able to reduce that to a 3.27% increase, which is approximately $16,000 annually. We did not have to do any plan design changes. So not having to change carriers and also not having to change the plan design was very welcoming to staff. We've had to change carriers previously pretty frequently just to try and reduce rates. So they were really happy to hear what they were able to stay with their current provider. So with that, we have a small increase on Guardian, which is our ancillary benefits, is roughly $2,700. And then, as I just stated, the medical renewal for a little over $16,000. And the recommended motion is there if you wish to use. Again, if you have any questions, I'm available. David Barton is here as well.
Any questions from the council?
There's a recommended motion, Mayor. So.
Dramswell.
I'll go ahead and make the recommended motion. I move to authorize the city manager to renew existing ancillary benefits with Guardian and to accept Florida Blue's proposal of PPO Plan 05904 with its companion health savings account plan to be effective September 1, 2018.
We have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second, Mayor.
We have a second by Mr. Marlar. Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mayor. What is the deductible on this plan?
The deductible has left my brain at the moment. David, would you mind helping me out there? Sorry about that, sir.
That's okay.
Good evening. David Barton with Barton Fenstermaker, Tondello and Associates. Mr. Braden, the deductible is $2,500. It's a 80% co-insurance plan. It has a maximum out of pocket of $6,000.
That was my next question. What was the max out of pocket? Okay. That's all I have, Mayor. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Braden. So we have a motion, we have a second. Seeing no further discussion. The vote's unanimous, so moved. Item number 2, transmittal of required 2017 biennial transportation district monitoring report.
Yes, sir. The transportation element of the city's comprehensive plan provides goals, objectives, and policies for the continued implementation of multimodal transportation districts within the city. Every year, the city does a traffic count study during the peak of season, and then every other year, we are required to do a transportation district monitoring report. This report is coming to you from 2017, and Ms. Jenny Breiler, Community Development Director, and also Mr. Tim Whaler, who wrote this report while he was working for RPG, are both here to explain anything, any details, and answer any questions.
Does anyone have any questions concerning this report? Ms. Lejeune, I guess Yeah, do you want to, does somebody want to take that? There's you made a recommended motion, correct, on that? Hello? Oh, everybody's looking for it. Would you kindly read it, Ms. Lejeune? And then somebody can say what she said?
Yes, sir. The recommended motion is that I move to accept the biennial multimodal transportation district monitoring report and authorize staff to send to the appropriate reviewing agencies.
So moved.
So seconded.
So moved and so seconded. Does any, could you clear the voting little deal up here for me? I touched the button too many times. Okay, we got a motion, we got a second. Do we have any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none? Oh, Mr. Marler?
Sorry, that was me. I apologize. I don't know how to work this thing.
Somebody
Webb
bet.
showed me, Betty. It was very...
Webb, can we have a little help?
He might as well just stay over here and sit with me.
Help me through the process here. As soon as we clear this thing, I'll hit the button and we will take this to a vote.
Sorry.
There we go. Thank you very much.
That's all.
All right.
Sorry. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, cast your votes, council. The vote is unanimous, so moved. All right, we go to City Manager's report, item number C. Ms. Lejeune?
Yes, sir. I'd like to invite Ms. Karen Jankowski forward to give this report.
You have the floor, ma'am.
Thank you again. I appreciate it. I must apologize. There were a couple errors in my haste to try and provide this information to you. So as I go through this, I'll point those out to make sure that those are clarified. So what we have for you here is some options for recruitment and replacement of the city manager. There is option A, as on the agenda. 2A is internal recruitment. Of course, that would pretty much devote all of my time to being able to do all of those steps. And currently, I have to say, you know, we're in budget season, medical renewals. I do have 5.5 other vacancies currently that I'm trying to recruit for. So that would take a lot of my time. We have an option to where we can also create a search committee. We can also provide an RFP, if you wish, for a search consultant firm. We did that. I was able to prepare that for council a couple of years ago. We didn't actually make it to that point because the position was offered to Ms. Lejeune, but that could range from $18,000 to $25,000 for a good recruitment firm. So that's one of the disadvantages. However, the advantages to that is that's their job. So they have, you know, they have the pulse of what's moving with the city manager positions and who's going where, who maybe might be on the way out to from another position, so they're in transition. So that part kind of handles the recruitment and replacement. And then also with D there, the Senior Advisor Program through FCCMA. They were formerly known as range riders, but these individuals are retired managers that could help assist us. So my idea with that was that they could potentially put an interim in a quick amount of time to be able to help us with that. And so this brings me to my first oops. Our senior advisor for our region is actually a Mr. Edwin Eddy. Mark Durbin we had used 2 years ago, so I apologize about that error. I have his phone number if you want to take that down. If you have an opportunity to reach out to him, you can do that. It's 850-232-9722. And I'd be happy to follow up with an email later with the corrections on this or whatever might come about. Also, that item D3, there's a section there where it refers to an attachment, and that was at a different step, so I apologize about that error. But I do have members in transition list from FCCMA. So these individuals have either retired and they're still looking for positions to help people with in just typically just a short-term basis, or they're individuals that are looking for another position. So I have those here. I've got a copy for City Clerk, and I can provide those to you. At this point, I'd like to entertain some questions if you have any.
Mr. Oberdire, I see that you're up first.
Okay, so I talked to FCCMA. Actually, I talked to a former city manager here, and he put me on to FCCMA, which is the Florida City County Managers Association, which is part of the Florida League of Cities. And so in their role, I talked to their CEO or executive, whoever he is, and he put me on to this Buzz Eddy, who was at one time was I guess the city manager in Gulf Breeze, and he comes very highly recommended. He's had 35 years of experience in the city and county management field. So what they're capable of doing for us is that they can come over here, and they'll come over at no expense to us, because since we're members of the Florida League of Cities, they'll do this for us at no cost to us. They'll come over here. Buzz would come over along with anybody else that they wanted to bring, and kind of walk us through this process of how to go about doing this, and the steps that we need to do to number one, which I think is our most immediate need, is we need to find an interim city manager, because Carice leaves the 14th of August. So we've got like about a month, less than a month, to find somebody to sit in her chair, and then to guide the city and to keep the city on the tracks until we can get a permanent city manager. And then the Florida League of Cities and the FCCMA and Buzz and his folks can then kind of walk us through the same process that we just had here to figure out what we want to do and what's in our best interest, and what's the best way for us to go out and find another city manager. And I'm going to tell you, I don't envision that as being a very easy process for a lot of reasons that we've discussed tonight. But so I think we need to be very careful about doing this. I think we need to take as much time as we need. If it takes us 4, 5, 6 months to get this done, I think we need to be very, very careful in how we do this, and we make sure that we do all the right things, and we get the right person the first time, and we get somebody that we're all comfortable with. But in order to do that, we're going to have to come up with kind of what we want our city manager to look like. And it's not just a job description. There are a lot more things that go into finding the right person, and having the right person apply, and then interviewing those people, and then narrowing it down to the person that we're going to actually offer the job to. So, and I don't know how I can make this into a motion, but I mean, I would, and I'm happy to help with this process in whatever way the rest of the council would like me to do. But my recommendation would be that we contact the Florida League of Cities, the FCCMA, and Buzz Eddy, and have him come over, and I'm sure he can come over here by our next city council meeting, and have him kind of walk us through this process and give us some options, and then we can make some motions or have some discussion about how we want to move forward.
Mr. Destin.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with Skip's recommendation, and if you would prefer, I'd suggest that we set just a special workshop even before, and so we don't have to wait, because I think it is imperative that we get the ball rolling before our next scheduled meeting. Right. Now, if you prefer a special meeting so we can actually take action, that probably would be appropriate.
I'll get with Ms. Lejeune, and we'll look at some dates and put out a doodle poll and find out, make sure that the whole council can attend, and we'll start that process. I don't think we need a motion for that. We'll just get it done to go on that, along those lines that you recommended, Skip.
Or do we? You'd only need a motion if y'all did tonight, but you can actually call a special meeting, Mayor, under the charter, or 3 council members can notify the clerk they want to set a meeting, so it doesn't require a motion tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Burns. You have some more for us, or is that pretty much wind it up?
No, that's it. I'll just provide these members in transition lists, and these are the folks that could potentially sit as an interim. So that might be something to look at, and provide additional information for Mr. Eddy when he's available to sit with us and advise us. And maybe he can even, conference in if he can't be here physically, and be able to help you guys with that.
Mr. Burns, who shall reach out to Mr. Eddy from the city?
Ms. Lejeune, I think last time Mr. Casella had done a lot of that, and last time, do you have any ideas on staff who could do that?
Actually, I could reach out to Mr. Eddy, or Ms. Jankowski could reach out to him. That might be more appropriate as your HR manager.
That sounds like a good idea. We can go with that.
I'd be happy to do that. Thank you.
All right. We're ready to move on to item 4D, establishment of the fiscal year 2019 tentative millage rate and budget public hearing dates.
Yes, sir. I would like to have Mr. Bragg Farmer, our finance director, go over this particular item with you.
Mr. Farmer.
We received the tentative property value rate about 3 weeks ago, 2.5 weeks ago, and that value came in at $5,035,622,000. That was a 6.42% increase over our current calendar year, over last calendar year. For the benefit of Skip and the mayor, councilman, we have to set our millage rate today as a tentative rate. We cannot take the rate up, but we can always bring it down. So in past years, and I'm going back before the property values dropped, 2008, 9, 10, we would set it at a higher rate and usually settle around with the rate we currently are operating at. So that is an option that you have. In the motion that I have prepared today, I do recommend that we set the current millage rate at our current rate, unless you choose to set it at a higher rate, at which we can set the permanent rate in September when we have our first budget hearing. Another item of concern is we cannot have a budget hearing on the same day as the school board or the county commission, because our meetings are held on a Monday, and Labor Day is, of course, always on a Monday. Our normal scheduled council meeting for the first week of September actually coincides with the county's meeting. So I'm recommending that we move our first meeting from Tuesday to Wednesday, so that it'll be our normal regularly scheduled meeting, as well as our first budget hearing, and so we can, without having a separate meeting just for the budget hearing. With that, if you have any questions, I would ask that when you read the motion, you read the motion as it's written, as it's statutorily. There are some things that need to be talked about. One of those being the rollback rate, which is the rate by which we would collect the same amount of taxes next year as we have this year with that rate, and that rate is at 1.5520, which is below our current rate of 1.615.
Thank you, Mr. Farmer. Mr. Braden?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, that was just going to be my recommendation to keep it at what we have present, the tentative rate, because we had raised it last year to try to take care of some projects, and hope those projects were done, so that we can keep good on our word and reduce that rate this go around. So I wouldn't want to increase it at all just for the tentative. That's all I have, Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make that motion.
Go ahead, Mr. Oberdeer.
I move that council set the tentative millage rate for ad valorem taxes at 1.6150 mils, which is more than the rollback rate of 1.5520 mils, and confirm the date and times of the public hearing for the FY 2019 budget on September 5th and 17th, 2018 at 6 p.m.
We have a motion.
Second.
Mr. Dixon, second the motion. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, we'll take this to the vote. The vote is unanimous. So moved.
One other thing, Mr. Mayor, we have tentatively scheduled a budget workshop to allow you the opportunity to discuss the budget in an open forum for August the 13th. That's the Monday after our first council meeting in August. And we're going to be, that's the date we scheduled for it. And we'd really like to know if that's going to be sufficient for the council. I know it's a month away, but we really need to kind of get that date set so that we can prepare for it. You will be receiving a copy of the tentative budget next week, to the latter part of next week, and then the following week we will have one-on-one discussions with the city manager, myself, and you to at least go through it, give you an opportunity to ask some questions prior to the workshop, so you have a little idea of what we're doing. But the August the 13th is when we have tentatively scheduled that meeting, and we just need to know if that's going to be sufficient.
And would that be a 6 p.m. meeting? Or?
Yes, or we can do it at 5. It's purely up to you.
Yeah, that works for me personally. So, let's start it at 5. So maybe we can get out of there before time to eat dinner.
That's fine.
Is everybody okay with that? All right. That's what we'll do. We'll just go with your tentative date, make it permanent.
August 13th at 5 o'clock.
All right. And I think this is the last item on the city manager's report. The city council approval of 2018 annual right? Yes, I thought we did. Yeah, we did. We'll take a break just a second, Tuffy.
And you voted yes?
Yeah, you were the only one that voted no.
Yeah, you wanted to.
All right, item E. I feel your pain, sir. City Council approval of the 2018 annual transportation concurrency analysis, scope of services. Ms. Lejeune.
Yes, sir. As we talked earlier, the report is done on a biennial basis, but the actual traffic counts need to be done annually. I would ask Ms. Breiler, our Community Development Director, to just kind of give a little bit of background and detail about what you have before you.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you. Yes, and it may appear a tad bit confusing, but we had asked, excuse me, 3TP, which is Tim Whaler's new firm, to bid on that traffic count proposal, the scope of services. But we had also asked RPG, who had done the work prior, but their costs came in at a much higher rate. And so I'm recommending, along with Mr. Farmer, that we accept the 3TP proposal to do the counts along our connector roads. And Tim is here to answer any questions that you might have, too, on that scope of services.
I see Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just curious, are we talking of hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars separating the two?
I believe it was an $8,000 separation.
Okay, thank you.
Well, we need a motion.
I'll make the motion. I move council accept the scope of services for the 2018 annual transportation concurrency analysis with 3TP Ventures and contract for the traffic counts in FY 2018 for $8,244 and budget for the additional services of $24,425 in FY 2019.
We have a motion.
Second.
Mr. Marlar, you won that one. You get the second. So we have a motion, we have a second. Do we have any further discussion on this item? Seeing no further discussion, we'll take this to a vote. The vote is unanimous, so moved. All right, we've got to cover a lot of stuff on the agenda. What I'm going to do, Tuffy, I'm going to give you a break. We're going to take a 5-minute recess at this time, and then we'll get into our public hearing process. Could everyone make their way to their seats? We'll get started here in a second. Thank you so much. All right, we'll go ahead and call the meeting back to order. Next, we're going to do the public hearing portion under item 5. Mr. Burns.
Ordinance number 18-09-LC, an ordinance of the City of Destin, Florida, providing for modification to Article 8, Transportation, providing for amendments to vehicle parking standards, modifications to handicap parking within recreational land uses, providing for findings of fact, providing for incorporation into the Land Development Code, providing for conflicting provisions, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date, and this is here on first reading.
Okay, and at this portion of it, thank you, Mr. Burns. Should we do the public comment first, sir?
Actually, I'd get an explanation if Jenny wants to do a presentation on it from staff, so the public has a better idea what it is and they can comment.
Ma'am?
Thank you, Mayor and Councilman. I am presenting this amendments to the Transportation Land Development Code section, Article 8. And in it, we've done a couple of things. We've removed the requirement for handicap parking for the neighborhood parks. Our code currently says recreational facilities need to provide one handicap parking space. We're also amending some code provisions so that it's not an automatic reduction in the amount of parking that you are required to have on site. Right now, the code is a little ambiguous that it says if you may get up to 80%, but I think 80% reduction in or 20% reduction in your parking requirement, but that's only if you provide some other things on your site as well to contribute to your multimodal transportation network. So we're making those changes, and then we're eliminating the Tier 2 and Tier 3 references and taking out the ability for some of the harbor district to have some off-premise parking, inconsistent with the rest of our multimodal transportation language that's in our comprehensive plan.
That pretty much it?
Yes, sir.
All right. Mr. Destin.
Thank you, Mayor. I know that we had talked about this a couple of weeks ago, and we had, I don't know if we tabled or if we continued, but we did include that we wanted to have a special workshop discussion, and I don't believe that's occurred on this specific topic. So I'm not going to be able to support this in its current form now because I really need to understand from an intimate standpoint what it'll look like, what some of these cascading effects could be, considering some of the reductions on on-site versus on-site. I really need to get my arms around it, and I'd prefer to do that in a specific workshop where I can dedicate all my time to just talking about this one topic where we can go item by item before I go and say yes. And if that's possible, I don't know how the rest of the council feels, but I'll, rather than make a motion, I think probably I'd let them weigh in, and then we'll see where the consensus lies and maybe offer up a motion.
Yeah, and what we can do is hear from other council members, and then we'll do the public hearing portion of it, and then do a motion after that, if that's okay with you, Mr. Destin. Okay, next up will be Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, there were just several questions that I had, and I think it would be best, as Mr. Destin recommended. Instead of trying to go through it all tonight, yeah, I too would like to do that.
Thank you, Mayor. I do support modifying the handicap parking standard. I have no problem with that, but I am on board with grasping a better understanding of these parking reductions, because I think, you know, at least from my perception, as you see the shortcomings we have in parking in Destin, especially the old Destin district right now, you know, why would we do anything at the moment? I'm not saying we can't, but I'm just saying it doesn't make sense to take measures to reduce parking requirements right now. So,
Ms. Ramswell.
Thank you. Obviously, I agree. I think that we do need to have some sort of workshop or discussion on this topic. But one thing that caught my eye was on Article 8. It talks about the modification of Old Destin and Crystal Beach, and it talks about options that would lead to the reduction of up to 80% the maximum required spaces. And that, to me, honestly, that freaks me out, knowing the problems that we have currently with what's already in there. So I'm just giving a heads up that that's going to need a lot of explanation and a lot of explanation for me to buy into it, because it just seems unbelievable. But thanks.
Yeah, and I agree. That's why I think, Mr. Destin, where we can all sit together and actually look at a roadmap, so we know what we're voting for, and you know what's being prepared by our staff, so we can grasp it. Plus, you know, it'll be a public meeting, so people that have great concerns about that issue can weigh in as well. And speaking of the public, this is a public hearing, and at this time I would like to open up public comment on this ordinance number 18-09-LC. Anyone in the audience like to speak on this? Seeing no volunteers, Mr. Destin.
I'd like to make a motion to table and instruct staff to set a special workshop on this specific ordinance as soon as possible.
We have a motion.
Second.
We have a second. Any further discussion? We'll take it to a vote. The vote is unanimous, so moved. And just pick a date, email all of us, and we'll come to agreement and get a public notice and stuff like that. And I appreciate it. Thank you. All right. That brings us to a consent agenda, 6A.
Motion to approve consent agenda.
We have a motion and we have a second. Is there any further discussion on the consent agenda? Items A through F. Seeing none. Whoop. Mr. Destin, do you have a comment to make?
Can I have staff explain 6F?
All right, staff, could you explain, or Ms. Crease, could you explain 6F, Cybert Avenue Pay to Park project, please?
Yes, I'm going to ask Mr. Campbell to come up and give that information to you, please.
You almost got out the door. You shouldn't have stopped. Mr. Destin had his eye on you, sir.
Okay, the Cybert Avenue Pay to Park is the property that's adjacent to the cemetery. And we designed a gravel parking area for that area. I believe there's about 50 parking spaces. And we have a quote from our continuing service provider, which is H&T Contractors, to prepare that for parking, clear it, put the gravel, and pour the concrete drive, put the signs up, everything according to the development order. After that's prepared, we will, as staff, we will install the wheel stops and the signage and everything that's, to make that ready for pay to park. And that will be included in the same zone as the current Zerby Seibert parking lot.
Do you have an estimation on the completion by the contractor and then, total completion for that particular site, ballpark?
Well, the contract that we gave them was 60 days. They're going to complete it sooner than that. They told me they could do this in 2 weeks, but you never know what happens. You never know whether, any number of things can happen.
Okay, I got a couple people that would like to speak on this. Mr. Braden. No, I'm sorry, Mr. Marler. Well, it didn't say that.
Yeah, I would just
Mr. Braden, you're second.
I would just like to pull F and have a vote on it separately.
That'd be the best procedure to do. Pull F and then vote on the rest of the consent agenda, then treat it separately.
Well,
You don't have to vote on pulling it, but any individual can pull.
but we had a motion.
Yeah, we did have a motion.
So the motion maker needs to amend the motion.
I'll remove my motion.
Okay, so he's pulled the motion. So,
I'll make a motion to take A through E.
do I have a second? Second. We have a second. Mr. Braden, you finally get to talk.
I was just going to, it was on this F. The drawing that I'm looking at has got 40 parking places. Are there 10 other parking places somewhere that I'm
No,
not
I was
seeing?
mistaken. However many that we have, I think I started off with 50. That's why the number stuck in my head. But by the time I had to design the stormwater system and put the handicap spaces in there, it reduced it.
Okay, I just don't know if there was 10
No,
more somewhere
no,
else. That's all.
that was my mistake.
Okay, that's all I got. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, and we're gonna make a separate motion on that in just a second if anyone has any further questions. So right now, we have a motion on the consent agenda, A through E. We have a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, let's vote on that. The vote on the consent agenda, A through E, is unanimous. So moved. So we kept 6F as a separate item. So I'm fishing for a motion on this particular item so we can have discussion.
I'll make the motion. I do have some discussion, but I'll go ahead and make the motion.
I'll second.
We have a motion on the consent agenda under item F, Seibert Avenue Pay to Park. We have a second, and the first person up to speak, Mr. Marler.
I'm still having heartburn over the pay to park problem, the way we're doing the pay to park. I've had suggestions that either a lot of suggestions are not that we get rid of the pay for parking, but that we get rid of the app system and actually have an attendant there. I understand we can't do that this year, but I would like to look at when we do the budget next year, get rid of this app system because there are apparently some phones that will not accept the app or cannot get the app for whatever reason. And I think an attendant would be better, and we can look at putting that into the budget. Basically the same thing we do for Joe's Bayou. During the peak times, the 100 days of summer or spring break, 100 days of summer, have attendants at these parking lots and not have the pay for park because I just have heartburn over that. I would rather get the parking garages and have the structured system. I hope it's still going to be coming to us in the next couple of years, but that's my problem with it. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Marler. Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mayor. I wasn't going to bring it up tonight. It's a different meeting, but I would like it, and I've been doing a little bit of research on the kiosks that we put out. Instead of manning it or anything, they just go in and pay by credit card or whatever and see if that's a viable option. So it makes it a lot easier. I went by and people have their phone up and they're trying to get the app, to download, and it's just aggravating. So I think the price of the kiosks is something that, we could put out there. Maybe a great way to go. You pay, you go in, and when you leave, you're done. So that's all.
Yeah, and of course, when you go to a hospital or a parking garage, you stop and you get a ticket, and when you get back, you stick the ticket in the machine and, swipe a credit card, or you put $1 in it, because the bad thing about paid attendance is you're dealing with people and employees and cash and stuff like that. So, the app sounds good. Maybe Destin and our visitors just aren't ready for technology yet. But yeah, and there's certain places where it's done on they got system where you pay, you punch in what parking spot you're in, and you put your money in, and then it reads off that you're paid for parking S8 or something like that, and apparently a meter person can come by and make sure they're paid. So there's some other systems. I think when we do our workshop, that will be a perfect time to have those discussions about the parking situation, because we're dealing with transportation at that time. So we have a motion, we have a second. Does anyone have any further comments? Mr. Byrne?
Kim always gets on to me at the LPA meetings if I let y'all say recommend a motion. Kim, are you fine with them just saying recommend a motion on this time? Yeah, could you repeat the whole motion, Mr. Marler?
It'll take me a few minutes to find it, but I guess the motion is...
I move this, that the city council authorize the city manager to execute a work order for the Cybert Avenue Pay to Park project with H&T Constructors, LLC, in the amount of $56,102.70.
We have a motion.
What he said.
Okay, you want to second it, sir?
I'll second it then.
We have a second.
Flip it.
Any further discussion on this item?
Can I make a comment, Mayor?
Yes, sir.
I just want to bring to everyone's attention here that we did receive one submittal for our RFQ for our parking, our pay to park, or our parking structure, parking solutions. And the company's name is Structured Parking Solutions. And this will be brought to City Council in the first meeting in August. We'll try to get out each of you a copy of their submittal, ASAP, so you'll have plenty of time to digest it. And I think this is going to be a perfect opportunity to talk about all the things that y'all have talked about tonight, including the ordinance that came up, because reading through their proposal, this is not a one-size-fits-all. This is going to take a concerted effort between the citizens, the council, and possibly, other avenues that have been identified to kind of get our arms wrapped around our parking issues here. But this is a professional group, and they'll be coming to you the first meeting in August.
And they'll be scheduled to do a presentation?
They will.
Good, that sounds good. That'll help us. We're just trying to digest a lot of information and make the right decisions.
Right.
Any further discussion on the motion and the second? Seeing none, we're going to take this to a vote. The vote is unanimous, so moved. We're going to move on to our last item on the agenda. Better run for it. Comments, presentations, Mayor, Council, Land Use Attorney, City Attorney. Councilman Braden, you're first tonight.
Thank you, Mayor. The only thing that I have, and I should have brought it up at the first of the meeting, and if we need to put it off, that's okay too. If not, if I can make a motion, and we get a supermajority, it's just going to be to appoint Mr. Jason Klosterman to the LPA committee. I have that a slot available on the LPA committee. If I can go ahead and cover that tonight, I've already discussed it with him, and he's sitting in the back row. If that's still okay, if he's still willing to take that position, I'm going to go ahead and appoint him to that committee. I'm not sure, I talked to Ray, but I'm not sure if he's filled out the proper application for that.
He did. We did receive it, but I thought he wanted to be on the Harbor Board, not the LPA. Did you just say the LPA?
LPA. He did fill one out for the Harbor Board, but I think we've...
I also have one on there with
Okay.
for the LPA. I thought I sent it in earlier this week, and I never received a confirmation letter from it. Like I got from the Harbor Board one, so I just went ahead and resubmitted it again. I didn't get confirmation.
So if I just go ahead and take care of my end of it, and then when he takes care of his end of it,
Okay, so you're okay then, he's okay with the LPA?
LPA.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
okay, I just wanted to make sure,
okay.
because he was at the meeting last month,
And-
the Harbor Board that we had. I just wanted to make sure.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Braden, when we did our change of ordinance, the whole purpose of number 7 was not to do any legislative actions at the end, but in this particular case,
If we need to move it to the next meeting, that's fine, but
I don't think that there's a need. This is an appointment, and so I just want to, offer you the opportunity that, no one objects, that we can do this particular appointment.
All you have to do is just move the set aside, do a motion on that first, and that requires supermajority. Then you can go ahead and just do a regular motion, and that only requires a majority to appoint the...
To set aside the
Yeah,
rules, the
yeah.
order of the day, right?
So moved.
So we have a motion to set aside the order of the day. We have a second. I don't see any further discussion. You guys want to vote on that? That is unanimous, so let's make the second motion here. Mr. Braden, you already made, well,
So I'll make
just
that,
go ahead
I'll
and
make
repeat.
that motion to appoint Jason Klossman to the LPA board.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion. We got a second. And any further discussion? I know Jason personally. He's been instrumental in working with me over the years in fishery management processes, going to DC. He will be an excellent addition to the LPA, and hopefully we can get him on the CRA as well, if he's that much of a volunteer. Thank you, Jason, for volunteering. Seeing no further discussion, let's take a vote. Never volunteer. Ayes have it, so moved.
Thank you, Mayor, and I do, again, apologize for not bringing that up at the first of the meeting, adding that to my, but that's all I have tonight, Mayor, thank you.
Mayor, real quick, could you take a 5-minute break? Kim Kopp and I need to discuss one issue real quick that might come up, and it might not come up. Sorry to be so cryptic, but it's protecting y'all legally, so it's 5 minutes, trust me. It's,
Man, that's right over your 8 p.m.
You're busting my record here.
we'll try to make it 2 minutes.
All right, we're going to take a 5-minute recess, please. No? That was free?
Not yet.
All right, let's,
In 2 weeks, you'll get an invoice.
all right. Next on our list of celebrities, Miss Ramswell.
Thank you, Mayor. I did want to start off with a couple of positives before I hit into something that's a little sensitive, but I was so impressed when I drove by, I guess it was last week, I've lost all track of time, but when I drove down here one evening after those street lights had been put up and they're doing the sidewalk, and it just looked spectacular. So I really want to give a shout out to Parks and Rec and all of staff, anybody that had anything to do with that, city manager, because it really looks terrific, and I can't wait to see the finished product. So thank you guys for that. I also wanted to another bit of kudos to Parks and Rec because they have brought in another tournament that literally I have friends in 2 different states that came here to attend this baseball tournament that has occurred at Morgan Sports Center. So continue, I mean, that's just amazing work you guys are doing and bringing some really major tournaments to this area. So thanks again for that. Under the charter, city manager, we as council are allowed to bring to you concerns that we have over certain staff. And so I did want to bring a concern forward because I feel like it has sort of escalated and become something that could potentially be a liability to the city. And this is regarding the deputy city manager that could potentially be in a position where you are. And so I really felt it was important for me to bring forward some concerns. It's very difficult to have to do these sort of things, but you know, as we've said earlier in different conversations up here, that council can't discuss anything outside of these meetings. So for things like this, this is really the only opportunity. And not that I want to sit here and discuss and beat somebody down, but I think this is something that we need to be aware of. And like I said, for city manager to really be aware of the concerns that I have and the potential for liability. I came across a reference letter that was written by the deputy city manager on October 29th, 2015. It's a letter of recommendation for the Destin fishing fleet, and it was done on city letterhead by the deputy city manager, essentially writing a recommendation for them to obtain a fisheries research grant. And my concern with that is, in fact, not too long ago, it's only been a few years ago, that our community director, community planning director, I'm not sure of his official title at the time, but he had actually signed a document in favor of a citizen in an active case, and that led to his actual dismissal from the city. And the city manager at the time actually spoke out and said that city employees, this is city manager Greg Casella, said city employees should always strive to not put themselves in a position where it appears they are choosing sides on a matter. And I think this is an example of, I mean, we certainly don't write letters of recommendation for citizens or people to obtain grants, and it was very concerning to me. And I submitted it, and I didn't really get any follow-up on it. But really, the whole picture is there's been several things that are concerning. I was also privy to information that the deputy city manager had spoken with a representative at the DEP who had asked for a city position on slips with the neighbor, the BI Inc. slips that were being applied for through a submerged land lease. And he said at the time that the city's in a settlement, so they don't have a position right now. And he said, well, what if they weren't in a settlement? And apparently he said, yes, I think definitely we would have a problem with this. And the problem I have with that is the only people that can issue an opinion on something is this council after discussion and a vote. You can't just say, oh yeah, we feel this way and we're going to do that. It has to be discussed and considered amongst all of us. So nobody should be rendering an opinion one way or the other, especially on something that's in dispute and the subject of litigation right now. Another concern is that most of us, I think we've got a lot of folks here that have been attending a lot of our meetings regularly, but we had several meetings in June having to do with the Harbor CRA and lots of discussions, and their appointee is the same individual. They had asked him repeatedly for documents and to bring different things to them. They expressed that to us. I went back and looked at the minutes. You can clearly see where that information was asked for and never received. And our staff members that are the representatives to these committees or the liaison, they are tasked with relaying information back and forth and providing whatever necessary information is requested and needed. So that's a concern. And then along this same line, and I'll stop on this, but it's providing inaccurate and contradictory information. And we sat in here and we heard, even the council has been subject to this, where we've been told this date was, the deadline, the absolute deadline, or you're going to lose it. And then a year later, we hear a different date, and the application hasn't even been submitted. Well, on 4/12/17, he told that committee that the 90% plans were presented to FCT when it was actually the 60% plans. And while that may not seem like a really big deal, it's actually turned into a really big deal because there's been lots of arguments back and forth about what percentage of the plans at, who's seen what, who's provided what approvals, and then you get to the grant, which is supposed to be shovel-ready. So that's a concern. By July 12th, he told them that the park was now officially funded and work would begin once it was approved by council. So we all know that it hasn't yet been officially funded. We're still waiting on that release of funds, and as we all know, the grants and all that have been the subject of a lot of discussion the last few months. October 11th, he tells the committee that he's going to bring them the plans that they've been asking for to the next meeting. 11/8, still no plans. They continue asking where they are, and in fact now he says that the application had to go back to the federal treasury, that it's still over with them and nothing's been done. Well, he told them at a couple meetings before, it's already funded. The council's just got to approve it. Then we get to December, still no plans. That committee still had not received the plans and the documents they'd been asking for. They started questioning why they were refusing to bring the plans. And then that's sort of when we had some meetings here where some of those committee members came here to our council meetings and started expressing their frustration. And, I hate that I'm having to do this, but I am so concerned about the potential if this individual is put in a position serving us as a city manager. And I would hope that these sort of things wouldn't occur, but they are occurring, and they have occurred. And this is a person that's been with the city for years and should know better. So, city manager, I know I've shared some of these things with you before, not all of them in their entirety, because I went through and accumulated some more information. But I did want to say this publicly so that the rest of the council and the mayor would know what I know, essentially, and the concerns that I have and for the potential liability that we could face. And that's really it.
Thank you, Ms. Ramswell. Do you want to take this issue up, make this an agenda item for a later meeting, or you just want to?
As council and mayor, we don't have the authority to hire and fire. That's purely a city manager purview. This is more just expressing concerns that I have noticed, and I'm very worried about the potential. So
thank you.
I'll leave it at that.
That's right. Thank you, Ms. Ramswell. Mr. Dixon.
Nothing tonight, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Overdeer.
Nothing tonight, Mayor.
Mr. Marler.
Thank you, Mayor. Under my notes is the Crab Island water taxi. I talked to Ms. Lejeune about this, and I believe some other staff members may be involved. My question basically is does this particular water taxi have a BTR? The reason I ask is they are cruising the docks. They've been kicked off of Harbor Walk, they've been kicked off a couple other docks, and then they started using the cities through a city slip at Royal Melvin Park. We have a sign that says taxi, but what does it define that particular taxi service or not? I'm just more curious if they have a BTR and have an address in the city of Destin.
To answer one of those questions, we have removed that water taxi sign. There's a lot of open-ended issues right now. The BTR Equity Study Commission did address the water taxi issue so that we were able to then establish a criteria for BTR, and criteria would go along with the water taxi. Unfortunately, that BTR ordinance has been delayed, so the council was not able to address that. I'm going to ask Ms. Bryla to speak to this issue because at this point in time, there really is no clear direction for staff regarding water taxis and water shuttles, and we would be more than happy to take direction and move forward at the will of the council on how they would like these type of vehicles to be addressed in the city.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Carice. I met with a gentleman that was running the water taxi today, and our current BTR ordinance would not require him to secure one because his address is not within the city of Destin. But I said to him, you know, it's prohibited that you pick up fares in public spaces because you can't render private gain in public property. And so he said that he had worked out some kind of a deal, and I said that's for parking, and I said that's wonderful. You need to bring that in the agreement so that we could have it vetted through our land use attorney and our city attorney to make sure it's consistent with our code. And I said, as far as I know, there is no place where you can land. You need to have an address somewhere that you can operate out of and not just cruise around and pick up people at Crab Island. But
So this is basically, we got a bad actor.
Well, yeah, Mayor, I think there may be even more than one. It's a really bad issue. The folks, it's dangerous, and the fact that people, I mean, we all know that most of the folks who come down here and rent a lot of these vessels have never been on boats before. They can't operate them, and then there's a subsection of people who are now visiting us who don't even have the common sense to not put themselves in dangerous situations. So they hop on this water taxi. I found out yesterday from some of the guys operating out in Crab Island, some of the vendors, that the drop-off point for the water taxi is actually a semi-submerged picnic table with caution tape on it. Now, you would think normal common sense would tell the general public, maybe, what do we do if a storm comes through? How do we get off Crab Island? But, you know, there's a lot of folks that just don't have a whole lot of good common sense, and they are patronizing this. I think we know it's at least one, there's possibly two water taxis, but it is definitely a fly-by-night operation, and they may have told you that they've got a parking situation figured out. That's a lie, that they don't have anything figured out. We are spending a tremendous amount of manpower chasing them out of our parking lot, which is adjacent to the Royal Melvin embark and disembarkation for them. I know the fishing fleet's probably doing the same thing, and these people are rough. I literally, 2 nights ago, me and Old Man Dewey had to go break up an absolute street brawl that these guys dumped off people who had been just floating around on Crab Island without a boat all day, and they had been drinking heavily, and they rode. There were 2 groups, one from Louisiana and one from Alabama, and they started not enjoying each other's company while being confined on the pontoon boat that's been converted into the taxi, and decided that their altercation spilled out once they got onto land, and it was...
In nautical terms, they call that a mutiny.
Yes. Yes, and it's no less than a street ball, and Larry Ashley's deputies showed up lickety-split, but unfortunately, it's a terrible burden to have to deal with all of this stuff, chasing off parking, there's overindulgence, it's just not a good situation, and I sympathize and understand that there's not a whole lot of tools that are at the city's disposal to try to address this issue, but it's systemic of a larger, broader problem we've got with just the general floating nightclub that is Crab Island.
He's been banned from Harbor Walk Village because we found out he was using whatever, we have addresses from number 10 to 100, and he was using several addresses, and people approached me, where is such an address? And I'm going, well, who are you here to see? And, oh, we're being picked up by the Crab Island water taxi. I said, oh, okay. And so I know they've been banned from our property and that I work for, and they've been banned from several other properties too. So I think the public access dock, I think, was his last resort. I know we have a legitimate water taxi in town, or a couple of them, but this guy, I don't know what's going on with him.
Mr. Morgan?
Thank you, Mayor. If you're looking for consensus on water taxis in general, I really support them. The Crab Island taxi is a whole nother issue. It's kind of like the boiled peanut guys never bothered me on Crab Island until the big barges and the kind of egregious vendors showed up. But I really support, and I think they serve a good public service and fall in line with our multimodal hopes and dreams. So I wouldn't support anything that hinders their ability to do business, where you pick somebody up at Sandpiper Cove and take them to Brotula's, or whatever. I think they do a good job, but the Crab Island people, we might not be able to do anything about it. But I wouldn't support anything that would make it tougher for the guys operating the right way to do business.
Well, maybe our BTR experts could come up with some recommendations for us to consider at the next council meeting. Ms. Crease.
Well, sir, the BTR Equity Study Commission did give recommendations to the council, and an ordinance was created. Right now it's pending attorney's review, and I'm sure whenever they're done with it, they'll bring it forward. And then at that point, council can discuss whether they feel that what is currently in those recommendations is sufficient. And at that time, maybe there's additional things that the council could direct staff to add to it if they feel it's not.
Okay, well, then can we just ramp that one up a little bit? Because it sounds like it's a serious problem, and see if we can't get something back before us ASAP for consideration. Mr. Braden?
Thank you. So you're saying we can't do anything with them operating out of the park, the public city property?
That we can, because we have the no commercial activity. And we have, on occasion, contacted, well, I have Captain Nix, and he has sent our Marine unit out immediately to take action on those folks. But as far as regulating the water taxis, we really don't have anything on the books right now. That'll be with the new BTR ordinance.
Okay, thank you.
And this might be an issue that maybe me and Mr. Destin can work on, getting the Coast Guard on them, because if they're running that kind of fly-by-night operation, they may not have the actual documents and needed certifications to be carrying more than 6 people on their little pontoon boat. So we'll look into that. I think that'll be the first place we can look. And it's not that we don't want somebody to be able to run a business. It's just let's do it the right way and not put our citizens and visitors in harm's way in the process. So I think between trying to ramp up, getting some type of rulemaking legislation to address it, maybe in the interim, maybe we can contact Panama City Safety Office, and I'll have that discussion with Mr. Coleman. All right, we have next on Ms. Marler. We took care of that. Is that good?
Other than kudos to the engineering department. They did get some signs and stuff out there on Noriega Point. It was working as of last week when I looked. I was too busy today to look much on the harbor, but it looks like it's working okay, so I'm happy. And I'm pretty sure that's all I got for tonight. I had some stuff, but I'll hold off on that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Marler. Mr. Destin.
Nothing tonight, Mayor.
Mr. Morgan.
Nothing tonight.
I have nothing as well. Land use attorney.
When we were on break, I put at each of your seats the proposed settlement agreement that Mr. Theriak and myself had worked out related to the floodplain code enforcement cases we had talked about. These are the structures that had the first floors that were not in compliance with the floodplain ordinance. We previously had an executive session where the council directed a certain settlement agreement. That agreement is basically put into writing here. The only thing I want to draw to your specific attention is that Mr. Theriak had asked if we could make one change at the request of his client. The new floodplain ordinance, as you know, has a more stringent requirement changing from 1 foot to 2 foot the distance for the first floor to be legal. And because one client needs handicap accessibility on the first floor, but yet wants to come into compliance with current code, he's asked if that one property, only that one, could be grandfathered in from before that ordinance. Because otherwise he can't come into compliance. So I will leave that to you all to decide, but other than that, this is the agreement that you had requested, which would require 1316 notices to be filed on these properties.
Can we take this up at the next council meeting?
Absolutely.
Okay, because we just got it. Everybody would like to probably double check the document, and then that way we can get a motion and have discussion, stuff like that.
Absolutely, and I apologize for the late notice. Mr. Theriak just got approval from his client today, and he asked if we could put it on, and I said, we would run it by you, but if you need more time, we could do it at the next meeting.
Everyone agree to that? I think that'd be the best way. So that's what we'll do. We'll get that on the next agenda. And you have another discussion about the House bill?
Only if you want to hear it tonight. Mr. Councilmember Marler asked me to do a brief discussion. Would you like me to proceed with that, or? Okay. So I'll make it very brief. If you have questions, we can get more into it. But as you are aware, a new law recently was enacted governing recreational customary use on the beach. Basically, the law provides that a city cannot adopt a customary use ordinance unless the ordinance is validated by the courts. In order to adopt the customary use, first the city would have to hold a public hearing on its intent to affirm customary use in the area with notice to all of the affected property owners as detailed in the statute. Then within 60 days of the public hearing on the city's intent to affirm customary use on the beach, the city would be required to file a lawsuit for the court to affirm that the customary use being sought meets the requirements of the statute, which is it was ancient, reasonable, without interruption, and free from dispute. And then again, all property owners would have to be noticed of the lawsuit, and they would then have time to intervene in the suit. So it kind of codifies a little bit of what was already the law. Essentially, there's a couple of counties that are grandfathered in, St. John's and Volusia, but that's about it. The Walton County ordinance at this point has been invalidated. And then the most recent update, just a few days ago on July 13th, the governor seems to have backpedaled a little bit on the statute that he just signed into law. He issued an executive order that encourages local governments not to restrict public beach access other than for safety reasons. And what that all means in conjunction with the new statute remains to be seen a little bit. So it's still in flux.
It's amazing what happens when you're running for Senate. Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Burns.
This is the last thing, hopefully, for the night. Last time, at the last meeting, we did this too, but this is just to ratify the motions that were passed back on June 28th due to what was not a sunshine law violation, but since we wanted to be safe, Kim and I thought we should do the procedure for a sunshine law violation. But I was asked about what the potential violation was earlier by one of the members of the audience, and what had happened, two of the council members had emailed the county The county had responded, and then those responses were included in the agenda packet on June 28th. And there was a question of, since y'all all got to see the agenda packet ahead of time, if that was a sunshine law violation, see that communication. We don't think it was, Kim and I'm pretty sure it's not, but to be safe, this is the curative process if there is a sunshine law violation, to bring it forward for a couple public hearings afterwards. And I need to read the motions in, or at least summarize them for the record, but the motions that passed back on June 28th, one was to move forward with developing the Melvin Park. That passed 7-0. And then the next one was for the City Council to have final approval of the design plans prior to any applications being submitted to the county. That passed 7-0. The third motion is sort of been mooted at this point due to other events earlier in the meeting tonight. And the fourth motion was to accept the city attorney's work with the county commission, advising them to hold up submitting any applications until this board has reviewed and approved the final plan and design of the park. And under the case law, I have to ask if y'all are going to change your votes at all. You don't have to vote on each motion, and then if not, then someone needs to make a motion to ratify those motions and to give anyone from the public a chance to come up here and discuss it.
And that was 4 motions that we're going to ratify if we decide to do it all in one bunch, correct?
They were, and the motion that I say has been mooted was one for there to be a meeting between the attorneys, the mayor, and the city manager. But I don't mean to be trite by saying it's been mooted, but I don't know if it necessarily still is necessary at this point.
Mayor, I'll make that motion. I move to ratify all the motions passed at the June 28th, 2018 special city council meeting.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Do we have any further discussion on this? Okay, we don't have any discussion here at the council. Does anyone in the audience have anything that they'd like to say concerning the 4 motions made during the special meeting? Seeing none, I'm going to call the question here. Okay, the vote is unanimous. Ayes have it, so moved. Seeing how that is the last item on the minute, I appreciate everybody's patience. I really appreciate your participation, and I'm going to adjourn this meeting.